So it was about Jurassic Ark, and of course I explained to them that the word Jurassic doesn't mean dinosaurs, even though we have dinosaurs there and the kids love them, and the adults love them as well. But Jurassic refers to the area around the Jura Mountains and rocks that are similar to that, and the rocks we have there are similar to the ones in the Jurassic in the Jura Mountains. So our rock layer, which is part of a huge, huge, huge rock layer, is Jurassic. And in fact, that name was given by a Bible-believing Christian, and that's good for people to know about the history of science. But also, here are a few people. We started out our work at Jurassic Ark when this petrified wood was found. Now, this is many years after that, but here are a few people involved in the ministry. You probably recognise some of them, but perhaps not others. Right, there's John bending over there, young Ben up the top there with the camera, and here's Daryl, who's the curator who works on the site, who lives up there and works on the site with one of our really big trees. And here's one of the things we do, of course, is we have open days as well, just like we're planning up at the UK Museum. And this is an open day at Jurassic Ark. And here we are in the orchid garden looking at the wonderful design of orchids. And oh, we've gone backwards. Let's see if we can go forwards. Yes, there we are. And this is the brilliant design that we see in the orchids. So at Jurassic Ark, we have creation, we have design, we have the history of the world in both murals and gardens and fossils, of course. And people come, and we have so much there. You could stay there for 3 days and not see everything. But of course, we also do experiments. Now, do you recognize these characters?
Just one or two of them.
Just one, or well, there are only two there. But I deliberately put that one up because some of the ladies at the meeting actually know Joseph. So. And there are two very happy men, because if you give men some water and some mud and some sand and a piece of machinery, well, that's bliss, isn't it?
We're very, very happy. That's all we need.
Yes, that's right. And that is, of course, one of our experiments at Jurassic Ark. And John and Joseph might have a bit more to say about that later on. But one of the other things we do, of course, is send out our regular newsletter, and we have an interesting story coming up about the oldest heart. Now, it's the oldest vertebrate heart, and it's a fossil heart that was found in the Kimberley region in Western Australia. And this was a media release from the university where the researchers who carried out this study. Now notice their heading, New Curtin Led. Now Curtin is the name of the university. This is their media release, so they have to promote their own organisation, just like we promote ours. New Curtin Led research discovers the heart of our evolution. Now what they found was actually a fossil fish. And this was the head, the first paragraph in their media release. Researchers have discovered a 380 million year old heart. And it was interesting at the meeting that I had for ladies. One of them said, oh, I've just heard this story on the BBC, or I've just watched the BBC News. The first story was about Ukraine. The second story was about our politicians. And the third story was about scientists finding a fossil. And the first thing they said about this fossil was that it was so many millions of years old. And she then asked me, do they say that about fossils whenever they report them in the news in Australia? So I had to assure her, yes, they do. That is usually the first thing people say about fossils whenever they're reported, even in university press releases. That's the first thing they've got to say. So anyway, they've claimed they've found this 380 million year old heart, the oldest ever found, alongside a separate fossilized stomach, intestine and liver in an ancient jawed fish, shedding new light on the evolution of our bodies. Now, notice the mindset there. Notice how they're looking through Charles Darwin's glasses, as we like to say. They found a fossil fish, and they're talking about the evolution of our own bodies, in other words, human bodies. Anyway, what they found was a fossil fish which was preserved in 3 dimensions. And instead of using the 380 million years, the editor of Science, that's the journal it was published in, headed the little paragraph there, a Devonian heart. Now, we'll come back to that in a moment. But the scientists started off their report. We described the only known example of a 3-dimensionally mineralized heart, thick-walled stomach, and bilobed liver from placoderms in the Gogo Formation of Western Australia. That is a real place, the Gogo Formation. It's in sort of northwestern Australia. Now, placoderms are an extinct fish. You won't find these swimming around in the sea at the moment. They could grow very, very large. They were similar to sharks and could grow very large. But they had an interesting sort of structure in that they had a sort of bony armor plating at their front end. So it covered their head and the region immediately behind them. And this is the fossil of that armor plating. The rest of the fish doesn't fossilize particularly well. So finding this 3-dimensional one with the a soft tissue structure in it was quite a spectacular find. But anyway, so placoderms they're an extinct type of fish similar to sharks, and they have these amazing bony plates covering their head and their thorax. And instead of cutting this fossil up, they actually scanned it, and this is something that we can do these days with X-ray techniques, which is really good because it means you don't have to sort of deconstruct the fossil, and you can see a lot of the internal structure without damaging it too much. And what they found is that they found it had internal organs which were similar to those of living sharks, and in particular it had this big bilobe liver, that's 2 lobes, and it could be used as part of the controlling of buoyancy. It had the same sort of shape and structure as that in a living shark, even though this was supposed to be the oldest one of these that were ever found. And it also had what was a 2-chambered heart. So that is an efficient pumping mechanism, right? And it was just located below its gills. So that's very similar to living sharks as well. And then they made a very interesting statement in their, they said the preservation occurred through bacterially mediated orthogenic mineralization. In other words, it was preserved because bacteria had somehow managed to mineralize the internal structure of this. Now, if you're not quite sure what those last words there, photic zone euxinia, that just means that it's low oxygen, sulfur-rich water. So interesting, sort of a whole lot of very interesting statements there. They say this thing is 380 million years old. It's got internal organs which are similar to those of sharks today. This is a fish that is known to be like sharks that live in the water today, apart from the bony sort of armor plating. And it had these fully formed, apparently functioning organs. You couldn't see the organs function, of course, but it had all of the structure that efficient functioning organs would have. And it was preserved by bacterially mediated mineralization. There are a few things we can say about that. What does the word Devonian mean? Well, in fact, it's similar to what Jurassic means. Remember, Jurassic referred to a place. It didn't describe so many millions of years. Devonian is like a place we've just been fairly close to. In our fossil convention, we were down on the south coast near Devon, and that's where a lot of fossil fish were found at some time in the past. So that area was called Devonian because from being in Devon. So when they found rocks with similar sorts of fossils elsewhere in the world, they were named Devonian. So don't be afraid to use those terms that are in the geological record. A lot of them were actually named by people who believed the Bible, like von Humboldt, who named Jurassic. So we don't need to be afraid of those. They either refer to places where rocks were originally described, and we found other ones that are similar, or they are descriptive terms like Cretaceous. And so there's no evidence that this thing was 380 million years old simply because it was found in rocks that were classified as Devonian. It just means these rocks are similar to the rocks in Devon. Now, as to whether it's the oldest heart, well, if it is, that means hearts have always been shark hearts or fish hearts, have always had that structure and have always worked well. So you've got evidence for design there and for after their kind, because no one has ever seen a fish that is not a placoderm evolve into one that is. Placoderms appear in the fossil record as fully formed placoderms, and then they disappear. So from the time they appear in the fossil record, even if you're using the evolutionary timetable from when they seem to disappear, they haven't changed. They've always been placoderms. Sadly, they don't exist now. And that is another sign that the real history of the world is one that's going downhill. It's going from good to bad to worse. We are losing things. The biodiversity, as it were, is going down. And so we have to look at the history of the world to see what might have caused that. And we've got evidence, of course, of massive loss of all sorts of different creatures as a result of the changes that happened after Noah's flood. And the final thing is the mineralization is very interesting. We've seen bacterially mediated mineralization in all sorts of other areas. And